It was the day my whole world fell apart. In that moment, my life changed forever. Well, sometimes life is going and you have your ups and downs and it's going around and something happens and it brings it to a screeching halt. And that's what happened to our family. On July 4th, we were out celebrating. My husband and a friend went out and they were on our wave runners when his friend came back and said, someone ran into your husband and the ambulance came, just rushed him to the hospital, but he should be fine. Grabbed my two little boys, rushed over to the hospital. The doctor started telling me when he got there what was happening, what they were doing for him, and then I just stopped him and said, what happened? I was thinking, is he paralyzed? Just get to the bottom line, what state is he in? And he said, we lost him. And those were the last words I expected to hear. So I had my two little guys outside and just called them in, our sons, and they were 8 and 4 at the time. I just got down on my knees and held on to them and just said, Daddy loves you very much, and he always will, but he's going to be doing it from heaven now. Gary and I had been married for 11 years. Suddenly, I'm a widow with 2 little boys, and it was very, very tough. Felt alone and had to do everything myself now. Father's Day was really difficult because it just brought back the memory of the loss. But I would have the boys write letters to him and send their most current picture from school, their school picture, and the letter that they'd written to him, and they'd tie it onto a whole bunch of balloons, helium-filled balloons we'd get, and then they would let him go and send him up to their dad in heaven. During this time, it was such a difficult time. I was in intense pain, and at times I would find myself in the fetal position, just crying and mourning and grieving the loss. And I still had to take care of my 2 little boys, and it was overwhelming to be dealing with this and be their caretaker. And eventually I had a nervous breakdown. I felt like I was falling into a dark abyss that I wouldn't be able to come back from. The Lord met me in this dark place by providing me with a Christian couple. They came alongside me and loved me, prayed for me, sang over me, parented me, and they really encouraged me with God's power and strength at this time during my life. They said no matter how far I would fall, God was powerful enough to bring me back from the place of deepest sorrow and despair. Years later, I began to long for someone. I wanted to be married again. I had had a wonderful first marriage and just wanted to have someone share my life with again. And it turns out at that time, I was a room mom at my son's 2nd grade class. And there was another room mom in there, and we began to talk. And she asked me about my husband, and I let her know that I was a widow. So after a short conversation, she asked me how I feel about Minnesota. And I kind of laughed because being from California, I never thought about Minnesota. But she said she had an awesome friend there named Jeff that she would love for me to meet, and if it would be okay if she gave him my number. Well, I'm really cautious and conservative. I'd never done anything like this, but I thought all the way in Minnesota, he's not going to want to call someone in California. So I gave her my number, and he did call. Our relationship progressed, and Jeff would call me every day. We would spend time sharing on the phone, praying together, and I developed a deep love for Jeff. I knew this was the man I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. And God was also speaking to Jeff's heart, because even months before we met, Jeff was journaling about possibly marrying a widow or possibly marrying a Latin woman, and I'm both. He flew me out here. It was the coldest day of the year in Minnesota that day, so he brought me a warm sweater and jacket, and then he drove me to his sister's house where I'd be staying for the weekend. Later on, I found out that when he went to get the car at the airport to pick me up, he said to himself, "This is the woman I'm going to marry." We dated for years, and then one day, Jeff took me to my favorite spot in California, and he expressed his love towards me and proposed. I accepted, and we got married. All of my family of origin and relatives lived in California, but we left it in God's hands as to where we would live, and we felt him calling us to Minnesota. It was a new beginning, but not an easy one. My son Jake was a teenager at the time, and he wore his shorts all through the cold Minnesota winter. Jeff had never had any children before, but God was faithful to make us into a family. In Minnesota, our family grew. God gave us another son we named Samuel, and Jake and Luke loved their little brother. Jake said he is the best thing that ever happened to our family. As I look back on my life's journey, I see how God took the hardest things in my life, the death of my first husband and my nervous breakdown, and how God redeemed it and made it all into something beautiful. God gave me beauty for ashes.